Hey everyone, welcome back to the next review in the On Wax review series. Today I figured I would take a few minutes to come on and talk about the latest from Beyoncé Knowles Carter, being Cowboy Carter, which is the 8th studio album in her discography, and certainly the one that is probably the most obscure considering her traditional review. But this is the second album in the trilogy that she's been planning, first with Renaissance and now this. And yet again, it shows a very, very similar album cover with her on the horse there. But stylistically speaking, even though there are similarities to Renaissance, this is a country album, and yet again, a huge, huge leap for Beyoncé considering what we have known about her, but then maybe not too much because, you know, there's always some country-leaning songs, like if you look on Lemonade, Daddy Lessons, which is my favorite song off of Lemonade, actually, is really such a great country pop tune. I think one of Beyonce's absolute best songs. So when I heard she was making a country album, I was quite excited because, you know, with someone like Beyoncé, you know she's going to bring something different and unique to the genre, especially with her voice and what she's talking about. Is certainly not what we usually associate modern country with. And that was the most interesting part about this all, was the fact that here comes this, you know, really strong, powerful, you know, very well-known black female artist moving into the realm of country music, which is something we don't usually see. And it's something that there's sort of been a stigma created towards, unfortunately, and sort of like gatekept from a lot of these artists who are like that and want to, you know, move into this genre. So, of course, huge, huge swing from Beyoncé, and huge it is. I mean, this album is very epic in scope. It runs for almost 80 minutes, and we'll get into that, but yet again, you got to give it to Beyoncé because I think the best thing you can say about this record is its impact and the discourse around this, because what Beyoncé did here is so revolutionary. And look, I think you guys know I love Beyoncé. Obviously, it's kind of hard not to. So I think it is quite obvious that I think that from a cultural standpoint, no one moves the culture quite like she does in the ripples it has on each genre that she dips her toes into or, you know, cements herself in. And I think that is very much the case on this album, right from the opening of American Requiem, which is almost like gospel-esque, you know, with the, you know, very, very prominent backing vocals on this track, backing Beyoncé up. But yet again, what she's talking about, this song, is the inherent racism against black artists in country music. And I think that's really interesting considering how right before this album came out, when the first couple singles dropped, country stations were refusing to play because, like, no, we don't play Beyoncé, we only play country music, which is, you know, very racist just on the offset to think that, you know, an artist who is predominantly known for something else can't jump into another genre and dip their toes in. And yet again, so much backlash caused them to relent and let those songs, you know, ride the country airwaves, and they rose right to the top, unsurprisingly. That's the thing, it's Beyoncé. You can't doubt her for a second, and you know her fans, the Beehive, they're going to be, you know, backing her 100%, and that's exactly what happened in this case. And yet again, I love that this song, you know, knowingly kicks off this record with that in mind, because it is quite epic in scope. It might run a little bit long for my taste, because there's some really, really, truly brilliant stuff about this track. And of course this album in general, I think the production on here overall is pretty stellar, especially for the first half of this record. Like, there aren't really any weak songs on this first half at all. I don't love a lot of them, but yet again, they're all very good, especially the two singles from this record, 16 Carriages and Texas Hold'em. Texas Hold'em especially, I think, has such a great groove to it, a really, really catchy country pop song. Yet again, what is the substance there? Not too much. Yet again, it's more in the vein of Renaissance. It's fun music. It isn't trying to, reach for anything too deeper most of the time, besides what I've already said and some things that I will get into later. But yet again, it's just a very, very well done country pop song. Though I think, yet again, with these two singles and 16 Carriages, which I would say I liked less than Texas Hold'em, I only had heard Texas Hold'em before the album had released, not 16 Carriages. But I think I have a similar sort of issue with the both of them that hold them back from really, really being great. I think the melodies get a little monotonous and a little rote, you know, in falling in the conventions of pop songwriting nowadays, which, you know, doesn't feel very flexible as it could be. And I think that's what really holds that, especially Texas Hold'em, from really, really, truly me loving that song. And yet again, we'll get into that as it goes along, but I am very impressed nonetheless by the number of features on here. Of course, you know, you even have like these little interludes, like a fake radio station, sort of like Dawn FM, from The Weeknd with Jim Carrey coming on. But it's a Smoke Hour with Willie Nelson. They got the right guy for that job. And I really like, you know, just his little brief appearances, though it doesn't really add a whole lot to the narrative of the record. But it's nice to see Willie come on this record and back Beyoncé up, if anything. And to take it back to the beginning of this album, after American Requiem, that leads right into Beyonce's rendition of Blackbird, surprisingly enough, but maybe not, because I think people often forget the context in which that song was written and what it's about, because of course Paul McCartney wrote it about the liberation of black women. Like, of course, that line, "You have only waited for this moment to arrive, blackbird fly." Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious, you know, especially if you know your music history, if you know your Beatles history. And so it would make sense for Beyonce to take that song, right, and make it her own. But she uses the same exact guitar part that Paul McCartney played on the White Album. And I'm really starting to question why. Like, she brings in some backing vocals or whatever as the song goes along, but it really doesn't justify its existence as a cover, because she isn't really doing much different. And look, of course, you know, got Paul's seal of approval, of course, you know, gotta love the graciousness of Paul McCartney and all these, you know, older, you know, musical icons, you know, coming to Beyonce's aid. But yet again, I don't think it's really necessary. I don't think it really adds a whole lot to this album, personally. But what I do think is quite incredible, of course, coming on this record, the legendary Dolly Parton. I mean, a woman in country music. If you're making an album and you're making that a point, you gotta bring Dolly Parton on. And of course, you get a little sweet interlude with Dolly on there that's really, really nice. But then that leads right into Beyonce's cover of Jolene, which, honestly, I think this is probably one of the greatest covers of all time. I truly mean that, which is really saying a lot, because Jolene is seen as Dolly Parton's, you know, signature song at this point in time. And I hate to say this, but in some ways, I think it might be better. Now, I know that's a bold statement to make, and I'm not quite saying that that is 100% how I feel, but look at it this way. I've never fully understood why that song is taken off as Dolly's best. You know, I could bring up Coat of Many Colors or, you know, anything else that is much more personal and also more progressive. Because here's the thing with Jolene. I mean, this is just the story about this woman, like, begging this other woman to not take her man from her. Where Beyonce in this rendition, not only does she change the lyrics, but she makes it very personal, and she makes it more indignant and defensive, like, you're not going to take my man, like, all this stuff, go find yourself another man, which of course I think has something to do with Becky with the good hair from all that time ago, but it somehow transforms into this song about the affirmation of her relationship and her family. It's unbelievable, and I think sonically it's fleshed out in so many different ways. There's so many other moving parts that come in, like different bridges that weren't present in the original recording. I truly think the song is spectacular, and I might think that it is one of Beyonce's best songs, period. And I think easily the best song on this album, which is kind of incredible because the song that follows it up is also the absolute, at least second best song on this album, being Daughter. And yet again, this is a very flamenco actually inspired tune, but certainly still rooted within country music. And it's a very personal and self-reflexive tale about, Beyonce at this moment where she finds out, at least, her character in the story finds out her husband is cheating and how she's going to reckon with that. And kind of like relating back to, she talks about, I said I'm not like my father, but yet again, there's that sort of, nature versus nurture sort of argument saying, part of him is a part of me, and even though, like, I try not to act the same way, that's always going to be something instinctually inside of me that I may not always be able to control. And, basically how she can turn on a dime. It really is quite a brilliant song lyrically, which I can't really say about a whole lot of songs on this record. And so to have those two back to back is pretty hard to follow up. And yet again, I really like the album from that point, from the beginning up to that point. And I thought, wow, this could be one of Beyonce's strongest records if it keeps going at this rate. But unfortunately, this album is almost 80 minutes, and I think the songs by the end of this kind of get a little generic, and I think really falter in regards to lyrical content and quality. And yeah, it does not match up to the rest of the record that came before it. And this album is just too damn long. I'm sorry. I think Renaissance was around 50-something minutes. Which was, not a super breezy album to get through, but it certainly wrapped up at a point where you're like, okay, like, this is reasonable, I understand, this didn't overstay its welcome too long, but I think Cowboy Carter certainly does. Yet again, love the inclusion of all these artists on here, like Linda Martell, bringing a shine to her, an artist I've never heard of, but supposedly she was the first black woman to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. That's a huge deal, and so to her, for her to give that platform that perhaps she hadn't before, being in a genre that was dominated by predominantly white artists, in a genre that kind of was hijacked from black people by them, it's really nice to see her give that support. And then you have, that, but then you also have Miley Cyrus on a song on here, which, it was nice or whatever, and it played off alright, but didn't really do much lyrically or musically that I thought was very interesting. Nice to see Miley Cyrus come back to country a bit and her roots. And then Post Malone shows up on one track, and this is where I think it starts diving into more, generic pop territory, more trap influenced sort of stuff that, I'm really not huge on, and I think kind of pads out the album to an excessive length that it really does not need, almost like this video. So, to wrap things up, I would dive in more, but really, it does kind of wrap up well, bringing back American Requiem at the end to kind of tie the loose ends, if you will. But I think that this is an album in which its impact culturally is going to be a lot more significant than the actual quality of the album overall. I honestly think that this is Beyonce's weakest record so far, which is not to say it's bad by any means. I don't think she's made a bad album yet or anything less than that. But even so, this isn't one that I'm really going to be putting on very often, besides maybe a few songs that I mentioned every once in a while, because I just think that, despite all good efforts, despite all the production quality that went into this, despite what Beyonce did for black women specifically in the genre of country music, I don't think that this is really a great record, just beat for beat. But I do respect the hell out of what she is doing, and I think, props to Beyonce. I mean, this is a huge deal. And I hope going forward this is something that we do get to see more black women in country, and maybe they can turn the genre around from where it's been, really a cesspool of nothingness for the most part, besides a few people here or there. So I really want to see the impact of this album over the next few years, because this is something that is going to change the tides, I think, and probably influence even better music out of it. And even so, not in love with this era of music for Beyoncé. Of course, love the Renaissance tour, and I love everything that she's doing as a creative mind and as the hardest working woman in the business. But as it stands, I'm going to give Cowboy Carter a very high 6 out of 10. It's fine. I think it has very great highs and middling lows that really bring this album down. Yet again, I like an album to end strong as opposed to just starting strong, because you want it to build something, right? And unfortunately, I think this album dissipates way too early. But yet again, I respect what she was going for here. And yeah, you should obviously check it out for yourselves. But of course, if you're clicking on this video, I'm sure you already have. And I'd love to hear what you thought about Cowboy Carter down in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Keep it respectful, though. I certainly wouldn't want to be throwing any Beyoncé slander out there, because I love the woman myself. And, I definitely try to be as constructive as I can when it comes to these reviews. But if you like these reviews, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Certainly going to be more this year, especially now that I've heard Billie Eilish is dropping a new album. Very, very excited about that. But of course, stay tuned for movie reviews if you're into that. Going to be a lot dropping over the next few weeks. Probably got some special ones coming up. And so yeah, guys, thank you for tuning in to this episode of On Wax Reviews. And I will talk to you guys later. Take it easy now.